This show is part of One Place, a daily network of focused briefings across the stories people follow most.
Welcome to today's Roundup. We have a lot to cover this morning as global and domestic headlines continue to shift rapidly. Today, we're looking at President Trump's latest warnings to Iran as the conflict enters its second week, and a significant legal blow to the administration's management of the Voice of America. We'll also head to Nepal, where an ex-rapper is leading a political revolution, and back to D.C., where a long-delayed memorial for January 6th has finally appeared. Plus, we'll discuss the sudden leadership change at the Department of Homeland Security, Trump's promises regarding Cuba and Venezuela, the devastating tornadoes that swept through the Midwest, and a major transition for the Vermont National Guard.
Starting with the situation in the Middle East, the war with Iran has now entered its second week, and the rhetoric from the White House is reaching a fever pitch. President Trump took to social media Saturday to warn that Iran will be hit very hard, signaling that the U.S. is currently weighing an expanded target list. This comes after a week of intense American-Israeli military campaigns that have already decimated the Iranian Navy and Air Force. Trump's latest comments suggest that areas and groups of people previously not considered for targeting are now under serious consideration for complete destruction. It's a stark escalation, especially since he's maintained that he will not negotiate unless Iran is prepared to unconditionally surrender.
The human cost is already staggering. With more than 1,300 people in Iran reported killed so far, we're seeing the conflict spill over into neighboring Gulf nations, with Iranian retaliatory strikes hitting or threatening countries like Kuwait, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. Just this Saturday morning, air defenses in Dubai intercepted missiles and drones, causing significant flight delays. Interestingly, Iran's president, Masoud Pezeshkian, issued an apology to his neighbors for these strikes, claiming Iran has no intention of aggression toward them. However, he quickly pivoted back to a firmer tone, asserting Iran's inherent right to defend itself against the U.S. and Israel. It's a volatile mix of contrition and defiance that has the entire region on edge.
Now let's shift to a major legal development involving the Voice of America and the Trump administration's management of federal media.
A federal judge has delivered what many are calling an absolute rebuke to the administration's attempt to overhaul the U.S. Agency for Global Media. U.S. District Court Judge Royce Lamberth ruled on Saturday that Kari Lake acted unlawfully while running the agency, stating that she satisfied neither the statutory nor the constitutional requirements for her role. The judge has declared all of Lake's actions over the past year to be null and void. This is a massive decision because it potentially reverses the layoffs of more than 1,000 journalists and staffers at VOA and its sister networks. Lake has already responded, calling Lamberth an activist judge and vowing to appeal the ruling. But for now, her entire tenure is being legally dismantled.
The implications of this ruling are wide-ranging. During her time at the helm, Lake was accused of turning Voice of America into a platform for pro-Trump propaganda, particularly regarding the ongoing conflict in Iran. She had dismissed contractors, fired the VOA director, and even struck a deal to carry content from the right-wing One America News Network. Judge Lamberth's ruling essentially says she never had the authority to make those calls in the first place. Plaintiffs in the case, including veteran VOA journalists, expressed deep gratitude, saying this is a step toward restoring the institution's mission of producing journalism rather than propaganda. It's a significant victory for those who argued that the firewall between government and state-funded news had been breached.
Next up, we're following a historic political shift in the Himalayas.
In Nepal, a brand new political party, led by a former rapper, is on the verge of a landslide victory in the parliamentary elections. The National Independent Party, or RSP, was only formed 4 years ago, but it has already secured 103 of the 165 directly elected seats. The party's leader and prime ministerial candidate is Balendra Shah, a rapper turned politician who first made waves as the mayor of Kathmandu. This election is the first since the massive Gen Z-led protests that ousted the old guard who had ruled Nepal for decades. It's being described by local media as a people's ballot revolt and a complete shift in the political paradigm of the country.
It's incredible to see how quickly the RSP has unseated the long-dominant parties like the Nepali Congress and the Communist Party. The party's success is a direct result of the 2025 uprising, which was triggered by something as simple as a social media ban but snowballed into a revolt against corruption and poor governance. Despite the festive atmosphere among supporters, party officials have actually asked people to refrain from victory rallies out of respect for those who lost their lives during the protests last year. With the RSP leading in both the direct and proportional representation votes, they are well positioned to form a government and implement the radical changes their young base is demanding.
Now, let's return to Washington for a story about a quiet installation at the U.S. Capitol.
After a 3-year delay, a plaque honoring the police officers who defended the Capitol on January 6, 2021, has finally been installed. Workers quietly placed the marker at 4 a.m. Saturday on the Senate side of the building. This comes after years of political stalling. While the plaque was required by law in 2022, House Speaker Mike Johnson had previously claimed the statute was not implementable. Senator Tom Tillis eventually led the effort to bypass the House's delay by passing a resolution to place it on the Senate side. The plaque honors the extraordinary individuals who protected the symbol of democracy, but its installation has not been without controversy.
Exactly. And some of the officers who were injured that day say the plaque doesn't go far enough. Officer Daniel Hodges, who was famously crushed in a doorway during the riot, pointed out that the original law required the names of the officers to be physically listed on the plaque. Instead, the current installation features a QR code that links to a 45-page digital document. Hodges and others argue that this is a rewriting of history, and that their lawsuit against the government will continue until the law is fully complied with. It's a somber reminder of the lasting tensions surrounding that day, especially as many of the rioters were recently pardoned by President Trump upon his return to office.
Moving on to our weekly political check-in, where the administration's focus has been split between war and internal staffing.
The messaging from the Trump administration regarding the war in Iran has been remarkably inconsistent this week. Secretary of State Marco Rubio initially cited an imminent threat as the reason for the preemptive strikes, only to back off those comments a day later and point to Iran's growing arsenal instead. This ad hoc approach seems to be creating some friction within the MAGA base. While many are thrilled to see a show of military force, others are more concerned about the economic fallout at home, especially with gas prices rising. It's a delicate balancing act for the White House, as they try to keep their coalition unified while pursuing a high-stakes conflict that more than half of Americans currently oppose.
And we can't ignore the major shakeup at the Department of Homeland Security. Kristi Noem is out as secretary after a difficult week on Capitol Hill. She reportedly struggled during hearings and faced criticism for a massive ad campaign that some saw as self-promotion. Trump has already tapped Oklahoma Senator Markwayne Mullin to replace her. Mullin is a former martial arts fighter known for his tough guy persona, but he's also someone who has shown a willingness to work with party leadership. This change suggests the administration might be looking for a more effective communicator to handle the department's aggressive agenda on immigration and border security, especially as internal tensions within the GOP continue to bubble up.
Now, let's look at the president's recent activity in Florida at the Shield of the Americas Summit.
President Trump hosted a coalition of Latin American leaders at his Doral golf course this weekend, and his comments on Cuba were particularly striking. He told the gathered leaders, "I'll take care of Cuba," suggesting that several regional heads of state had personally asked him to intervene. This comes at a time when Cuba is facing severe fuel shortages and blackouts. The Trump administration has actually eased some blockades on Venezuelan oil to allow sales to Cuba. But the underlying message is clear. The U.S. is looking for regime change. Trump is using the recent capture and arrest of Venezuela's Nicolás Maduro as a blueprint, signaling that Cuba's Miguel Díaz-Canel could be next on the list.
During the summit, Trump also went out of his way to praise Venezuela's acting president, Delcy Rodriguez. He credited her for cooperating with the United States and claimed that because of American assistance, Venezuela's economic outlook is improving through oil exports and upcoming mineral trades. It's a fascinating shift in rhetoric. Trump is essentially saying that as long as these leaders work with him, he will champion their success. He's framing the transition in Venezuela as a massive success story, which he clearly intends to replicate elsewhere in the hemisphere. For the Cuban-American community in Miami, these words are being met with a lot of hope, but for the region, it signals a period of intense U.S. intervention.
Next, we turn to some tragic news from the Midwest, where severe weather has taken a deadly turn.
At least 6 people are dead after a series of powerful tornadoes ripped through Michigan and Oklahoma on Friday. The damage is extensive, with homes destroyed, power lines downed, and entire structures leveled. In southern Michigan, the loss was particularly heartbreaking, as a 12-year-old boy named Silas Anderson was among the 4 killed. Governor Gretchen Whitmer has already activated a state of emergency for the hardest-hit counties, including Branch, Cass, and St. Joseph. Local residents described seeing massive whirlwinds sweep through their towns, leaving paths of destruction that rescue workers are still trying to navigate as they search for survivors and clear the debris.
Oklahoma was also hit hard, with a tornado cutting a 4-mile path of destruction south of Tulsa. 2 people were killed in the town of Beggs, and Governor Kevin Stitt has declared a state of emergency for 8 counties to ensure resources are available for recovery. The National Weather Service is warning that this severe weather pattern could continue through the weekend, with threats of flash flooding and more thunderstorms stretching from the Great Plains down to Texas. It's a reminder of just how unpredictable and devastating these spring storms can be, and our hearts go out to the families in Michigan and Oklahoma who are dealing with such profound loss today.
Finally, we bring you a story from Vermont, where the National Guard is seeing a change in leadership during a time of war.
In a ceremony held in a South Burlington hangar, Major General Henry Hank Harder took command of the Vermont National Guard this Saturday. He's taking over from Major General Gregory Knight, who is retiring after 7 years. The event was filled with the usual military pageantry, but there was a heavy cloud hanging over the proceedings. It was confirmed this week that members of the Vermont Air National Guard are currently participating in the war in Iran. General Harder acknowledged this in his remarks, noting that many of his troops are currently in harm's way. It's a difficult time for a transition, as the Guard is facing increased scrutiny over these overseas deployments.
The deployment has also sparked a political debate within Vermont. The state's congressional delegation has decried the war in Iran as unconstitutional, and a recent survey showed that 64% of Vermonters oppose the attack. Representative Becca Balint was at the ceremony, expressing support for the families of service members while also voicing concern about the scope of the mission. For his part, General Harder was careful to stay out of the legal debate, stating that his job is to ensure the Guard is ready for any mission assigned by the executive branch. However, he did emphasize that the Guard is leveraging all its resources to support the families left behind, as no one knows exactly when these troops will be coming home.
That brings us to the end of today's roundup. From the battlefields in Iran to the halls of the U.S. Capitol and the storm-ravaged towns of the Midwest, it has been a week of profound change and challenge. We appreciate you joining us to stay informed on these critical stories. If you found this briefing helpful, please make sure to follow the show so you don't miss our next daily update. We'll be back tomorrow with more focused coverage on the stories that matter most to you. Until then, stay safe and stay informed.